The paper Vanessa handed me was still warm from the printer. She held it out over the kitchen island the way a waitress hands over a check, and she waited for me to take it with both hands. It was a spreadsheet. My name sat in the first column, spelled out formally, Margaret Collins, like I was a stranger who had answered an ad. Underneath it, in a heavier font, was a number $400 higher than the one I had been leaving on that same counter on the 1st of every month since March. "Effective the 1st," she said. "And Margaret, we really should talk about the long term. Danny and I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere built for someone your age. Single level, people around, activities. 30 days is plenty of time to find something." My son was 15 feet away on the sectional, phone tipped up toward his face. He didn't look at me. He had that stillness he used to get when he was 9 and had broken something and was hoping the room would move on without him. He was 42 years old and he let the silence sit there and do the work for him. I looked down at the paper. Then I looked past Vanessa's shoulder at the door frame between the kitchen and the hallway, where there are still 4 pencil marks with dates beside them. The lowest one says, Danny, 7. I marked it myself with a carpenter's pencil I had borrowed off the framing crew, back when that hallway was nothing but studs and a plastic sheet flapping where the window was going to go. I folded the spreadsheet in half and put it in my cardigan pocket, and I said, "All right." That was all I said. I want you to understand that I wasn't being brave and I wasn't being weak. I said all right because I had spent 40 years learning that when your hands are shaking, you don't sign anything and you don't say anything. You go sit down and let your hands stop shaking first. So I went out to the back porch, the one I paid extra for because I wanted a place to drink coffee where the western light came in, and I sat in the chair with the worn arm, and I did the arithmetic I already knew the answer to. Because there was something about that house that Vanessa had never bothered to check. She sold real estate for a living. She had a license framed in the hallway and a magnet on the refrigerator with her own face on it. And in 3 years of living under that roof, she had never once pulled the deed. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 67, and I built that house on Bell Ridge Court in 1998, 4 years after my husband Ray died and left me with a boy, a used Buick, and $11,000 from a life insurance policy that took 9 months to pay out. I did the books for a construction company off Harry Hines for 22 years. I knew what things cost. I bought the lot when nobody wanted that side of the road, and I stood out there in the caliche dust with a clipboard while the crew poured the slab, and I picked every window and every hinge and argued about all of them. If you like stories about ordinary people who get pushed a little too far, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it keeps stories like this one going. Danny and Vanessa moved in 3 years ago. It was supposed to be 6 months. Her father had co-signed on a place in Frisco that fell through, and Danny called me on a Tuesday night with that voice he gets, and I said what I always said, which was come home. I have thought about that phone call more times than I can count, because generosity is a strange thing. You hand somebody the keys as a gift, and after a while, if you're not careful, they stop seeing a gift at all. They start seeing an arrangement. And then one morning, they start seeing a tenant. 30 days, she said. She had no idea what she'd just started. The first thing I did that night was get out my ledger, not a computer. A green accountant's ledger with a cloth spine, because I spent 22 years doing books for a construction company off Harry Hines, and I still think better with a pen in my hand. I sat at the little desk in the guest room, which is what they had started calling my bedroom, and I wrote down what I had coming in every month. Social Security, the small pension from the company, which the owner's son had tried to weasel out of paying and hadn't succeeded. $280 a month from a flooring outfit in Garland whose books I still keep, and another $350 from a dental office that has been trying to fire me for 6 years and can't, because nobody else can find anything in that mess. Then I wrote down what she wanted. With the increase, it came to more than half of everything I had. I sat there a long time with that number. What I kept thinking about wasn't the money, it was that she had printed it. She had opened a program and typed my name into a cell and formatted the columns and let the machine warm the paper up. That takes a while. You have to decide to do it and then sit there and do it. And the whole time you're doing it, you're thinking about the woman down the hall. I paid it. On the first, I left the check on the counter under the sugar bowl the way I always did, and Vanessa picked it up without saying thank you, because you don't thank a tenant. That's when things started coming loose, one small piece at a time. It began with the refrigerator. I came in from the flooring job on a Wednesday, and there was blue painter's tape running down the middle of the second shelf, and a strip of it on the door too. On my side, my half and half, my cottage cheese, the bag of grapes I'd bought that morning. On her side, everything else. She'd written nothing on the tape. She didn't have to. She was standing at the sink when I saw it, and she watched me see it, and she said, "It's just easier this way." We kept losing track of whose was whose. We had never once lost track of whose was whose. Then it was the thermostat. It stopped answering me. Danny had put some app on his phone that controlled it, and I'd get up at 5, which I have done my whole life, and the house would be 66 degrees and I couldn't move it. I asked him about it in the driveway while he was loading his golf clubs. He said, "Oh, that's a whole system, Mom. It learns the schedule. If you keep overriding it, it gets confused." I said, "I get cold in the morning." He said, "Put on a sweater," and shut the trunk. He said it lightly. That's what I want you to hear. He wasn't cruel about it. That's what nobody tells you about how these things actually go. Nobody stands up and declares war on you. They just get lighter and lighter about the things that used to matter, until one day you realize you're the only person in the house who still thinks a thing is a thing. Then my chair went to the garage. It was Ray's chair, technically. A brown recliner with the left arm worn down to the pale threads, because that's the side he'd rest his elbow on when he watched the news. I came home and there was a gray sectional in its place, still smelling like the store, and my chair was out past the water heater with a moving blanket thrown over it like something that had died. Vanessa was doing something on her laptop at the kitchen island. She said, "We can absolutely get it reupholstered. I just couldn't have it in the living room anymore, Margaret. My clients see this house." Her clients. In her mind, the living room had become a listing. She sold real estate, and she was good at it in the way that people are good at things when they're hungry. And she had a license framed in the hallway and a refrigerator magnet with her own face on it, smiling, above a phone number. Everything in that house had started to become a photograph of itself. She replaced my kitchen towels with white ones that we weren't allowed to use. She took the pencil marks on the door frame between the kitchen and the hall and covered them with 2 coats of Swiss coffee. And when I came in and saw that flat, clean paint where Danny, 7, had been, I had to go stand out on the back porch for a while. She'd painted over the day my son turned 7. She didn't even know she'd done it. That's the part I couldn't get past. To her, it was a smudge. I tried talking to him. I want to be honest about how many times I tried, because when people hear a story like this, they always want to know why the woman didn't just say something. I said plenty. I caught him in the driveway on a Saturday in the middle of October, with a mockingbird going crazy in the crepe myrtle I planted in 1999, and I said, "Danny, I need you to hear me. I'm paying rent in my own house, and now she wants $400 more. And he did the thing he does, which is get very reasonable. He leaned back against his truck and folded his arms and said, Okay, but let's be fair. There's 4 people's worth of utilities on this place now." 3, I said. "There's 3 of us. Her sister's here half the time." "That's my point, Danny." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, the mortgage doesn't pay itself." And I stood there in my own driveway and I felt something go very quiet inside my chest. There has not been a mortgage on that house since March of 2011. I made the last payment myself, at a branch on Forest Lane, in person, because I wanted to hand it to somebody and watch them take it. I drove home and sat in the car in front of the house for probably 10 minutes. My son didn't know that, or he knew it once and let himself forget it, which is worse, because forgetting is a decision you make slowly so you never have to notice making it. I said, "Is that what she told you?" And he said, "Mom, don't do this. Don't make it a thing. She's just organized. You know how she gets. It's not about the money." "Then what is it about?" He looked at the house. He looked at it the way you look at a thing that belongs to you. And he said, "It's about having a functional household." Then he got in his truck and went to play golf. That was a Saturday. The following Tuesday, I came home from Garland at 4 in the afternoon, and there was a white SUV in the driveway and a young man in the front yard with a camera on a tripod, backing up onto my grass, taking pictures of my house. He was maybe 25, and he had one of those camera bags with 100 zippers, and he was so busy framing the shot that he didn't hear me come up behind him. I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" He turned around with a big open face. "Oh hey, are you the mother-in-law?" That's what he called me. Not ma'am, not anything, just the mother-in-law, like a fixture that had come with the property. "I'm Margaret Collins," I said. Cool. I'm just doing pre-listing shots. Vanessa likes to have exteriors banked before the light changes in November." He looked back through his camera. "Would you mind stepping off the walk? Just for a couple frames." So I stepped off the walk. I stood on the grass I planted, on the far side of the crepe myrtle, with my purse on my arm and a bag of groceries hanging from my hand, and I watched a boy photograph my house while asking me politely to get out of the shot. I want to tell you that I said something. I didn't. I went in through the garage door like the help. Vanessa was at the island with her laptop and a candle going, and she didn't even look up when I set the bag down. She said, "Did Jordan get the front done? The light's better today than it'll be Thursday." "Vanessa," I said, "why is there a photographer in the yard?" And then she did look up, and she gave me the face she gives at open houses, warm all across the front and nothing behind it. "Okay, I actually wanted to sit down with you and Danny about this together, but since you asked..." She closed the laptop halfway. "This house is sitting on a lot of trapped equity. Interest rates aren't going to be friendly forever. We could put it up in the spring, do very, very well, get into that Frisco development where Danny's always wanted to be, and get you settled somewhere appropriate. There's a place off Coit with a garden club and a nurse on site. My mother's friend loves it," I said. "Get me settled." "It's a good thing, Margaret." She said it kindly. That was the worst part. How kindly she said it. "Nobody wants to have this conversation in 5 years when it's an emergency. We're being responsible." "And whose house are you selling in the spring?" She laughed a little like I'd made a joke that didn't quite land. "Well, eventually it all comes to Danny anyway. We're just being smart about the timing." There it was. That was the whole thing, laid right out on the counter next to the candle. In her mind, that house was already hers. She was just waiting on paperwork and a funeral, and she decided she didn't feel like waiting. 2 days later, I drove down to Waxahachie to help my friend Doris's sister after her knee surgery. It was 3 nights. I'd told them at dinner, I'd written it on the calendar in the kitchen, and Danny had said, "Drive safe, Mom," without looking up from his plate. I came back on a Friday around 6. It was already getting dark early, and the porch light wasn't on. And the first thing I saw when I pulled in was a little gray box hanging off the handle of my front door. A lockbox. The kind agents put on a house so other agents can get in. My key went into the deadbolt about a 1/4 inch and stopped. I stood there and tried it again, because that's what a person does. You try the same thing twice, like the world might have made a mistake. Then I walked around to the garage door and punched in the code, 1998, which had been the code since the day the opener was installed, and the keypad blinked red at me 3 times and went dark. Through the front window, I could see into my own living room, where the lamp was on. My things were not in the guest room anymore. I found them later that night in the garage, in 11 cardboard boxes stacked against the wall by the water heater, next to Ray's recliner under its blanket. My winter coats were in a black trash bag. My ledger was in there somewhere, and my wedding photograph, and a shoebox of Danny's school pictures from every year between kindergarten and 12th grade, and all of it was labeled in Vanessa's neat handwriting with a single word on each box. Margaret. I called Danny. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail on the second ring, which means a thumb. I stood on my own porch in the dark with my overnight bag at my feet, 67 years old, and I texted him, "I can't get in the house." The 3 dots came up. They went away. They came up again. And then, "We're at dinner with Vanessa's parents. This isn't the time. We'll talk tomorrow. Please don't make a scene at the house. Don't make a scene at the house." I read that about 9 times. And what got me wasn't the words. It was the pronoun sitting there where it had no business being. We. He'd chosen. He hadn't even had to think very hard about it. Doris lives 4 doors down, and she has since 2001, and she came out in her robe with her porch light on, and she didn't ask me one single question. She just said, "Come on, Margaret," and put me in her spare room with the flowered wallpaper, and brought me a cup of tea I didn't drink. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time with my purse still on my lap, like I was in a waiting room. Doris's clock in the hall ticked. Somewhere down the street, a dog was going at it about something, and I did the arithmetic of my life the way I'd done it on that ledger, except this time, it wasn't money. 1994, Ray dying in the spring, and me at 45 doing invoices in the morning and crying in the truck at lunch, and being fine again by 3 o'clock when I picked Danny up. 1996, telling a loan officer with a bad tie that a widow bookkeeper could absolutely carry a construction note, and being told no twice at 2 different banks. 1998, standing on a slab in the caliche dust with a clipboard, arguing with a framer about a window I wanted 8 inches wider because I wanted the west light in the afternoon. 2011, walking into a branch on Forest Lane with the last payment and handing it to a girl who didn't understand why my hands were shaking. I had built that. Nobody gave it to me. I built it out of $11,000 of insurance money and 22 years of other people's numbers, and I had opened its door to my son on a Tuesday night because he called me with that voice, and now I was sitting in Doris Whitlock's spare room with my coats in a garbage bag. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that, not because there's anything wrong with crying, but because what came instead surprised me. What came was quiet, and cold, and steady, like a light coming on in a room I hadn't been in for a long time. I got a pen out of my purse, and I started a list. On Saturday morning, Doris drove me downtown to the Records building on Elm, because I didn't trust myself on the Central Expressway that day. It's a plain place. Fluorescent lights, a counter, a woman behind the glass eating almonds out of a Ziploc bag, a line of title clerks, and one man arguing about a boat. I gave her the address on Bell Ridge Court and asked for certified copies. She typed for a while, and then the printer behind her started up, and I stood at that counter and listened to it print, and my heart was going like I'd run up a flight of stairs. She slid 3 copies under the glass and I paid the fee, and I read the top of the first page right there. Then I put them in my purse and I said thank you. And Doris and I went and had eggs at a Denny's on Northwest Highway, and I didn't say a word about it for 4 days. I need to take you back for a minute because none of what happened next makes sense unless you understand a conversation I had in 1998 with a man named Al Vadrine. Al ran the framing crew, 60-some years old, hands like tree roots, a Marlboro permanently unlit in his shirt pocket because his wife had made him quit, and he compromised by carrying one around. I'd hired his crew for the house because I'd cut their checks for 11 years and knew exactly what kind of men they were. The morning we did the paperwork on the lot, I came out to the site with the folder still under my arm, and Al asked what I'd signed. I told him. He asked whose name was on it. I said mine, and I remember shrugging, because at 49, I still had the habit of apologizing for taking up space. I said Danny's 14. He'll get it all someday anyway. Maybe I should have put him on it. Al lit that cigarette for the first time in 2 years. He said, "Margaret, you listen to me. A house is not a feeling. A house is a piece of paper with a name on it, and the name on it is who gets to decide." He said, "You built this out of a dead man's insurance money and your own 2 hands. Put your name on it, and don't you ever put another one next to it. Not for love, not for taxes, not for nobody's wife." I laughed at him at the time, told him he'd been divorced too many times to have an opinion. I have thought about Al Vadrine every day since that Friday night on the porch. Danny came to Doris's on Sunday afternoon, looking like a man who hadn't slept, and he did what he always does, which is apologize for the smallest available piece of it. He said the lockbox was a misunderstanding. Vanessa's assistant had put it on the wrong house, and the locksmith had been scheduled weeks ago because of an insurance thing, and nobody meant for me to be locked out. And why hadn't I just called? I said I did call. Twice. He looked at his shoes and said, "Mom, come home. Come home." He used my own words on me, and I don't think he even heard himself do it. So I went home. I carried my own boxes in from the garage while Vanessa stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, telling me she was so relieved we'd all cleared the air. I put my winter coats back in the closet, and I put Danny's school pictures back in the drawer, and I hung Ray's photograph back on the wall. And I said thank you when Vanessa handed me a new key. And then, on the 1st of November, I wrote her a check for the full increased amount and left it under the sugar bowl. She picked it up without looking at me. Good. That's exactly what I wanted her to do. If you're the kind of person who's ever been made to feel like a guest somewhere you belonged, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot of us. Monday, I called Carolyn Estes. She drafted contracts for the construction company for 9 years, and she used to make me redo her expense reports because she said I was the only one who'd tell her the truth. She's got an office in a converted house in Oak Cliff with a dog under the desk. I put everything on that desk in the order I'd listed it on Doris's flowered wallpaper bed. The certified copies, the property tax statements, every one of them for 26 years, addressed to Margaret L. Collins. The homeowner's policy with my name as the insured, the payoff letter from March of 2011, the utility accounts, all in my name, because they'd never bothered to change them, and the bank record of every check I had handed that woman since March, 8 of them, each one written by me. Carolyn went through it slowly. The dog snored. At one point, she took her glasses off and rubbed her eyes and said, "Margaret, do you understand what you've been doing?" I said I had a fair idea. She said, "You've been paying rent to your own guests." And she explained it to me the way you'd explain it to anybody, which is that there's no lease and no deed of trust and no name but mine anywhere in 26 years of paper, and that what they were was not owners and not tenants, but people who were in that house, because I had once said, "Come home." She said Texas has a process for this, and the process has steps, and notice periods, and a justice court. And it is not fast, and it is not dramatic, and she'd handle every bit of it. She started writing a letter right there. I said, "Carolyn, put the letter in an envelope and give it to me." She stopped writing. She said, "That's not usually how we do it." I said I knew that. And then I told her the truth, which was that I did not want a letter to arrive at my house in the mail while I was out buying half and half. I had built every room in that place. I wanted to be standing in one of them. She looked at me for a second, and then she smiled a little and said, "All right, then let me tell you exactly what to say and exactly what not to say." That was Monday. On Wednesday, Vanessa knocked on my door at 7 in the morning, already in her blazer, and told me that Saturday at 2 there'd be a family meeting at the dining table. Her mother and father were driving in from Tyler. Her broker was coming, a man named Kurt something, to walk everybody through the spring timeline. She said, "It's just so we're all aligned. You should be there, Margaret. It concerns you." I said, "I wouldn't miss it." Then I closed the door and I sat down on the edge of my bed, and I called Carolyn Estes and asked her one question. They set the table like a presentation. Vanessa had folders, actual folders, glossy, with her face on the front and a little gold foil thing in the corner, one at every seat. Her mother and father drove in from Tyler and got there at 1:30, and Joanne hugged me too long and said, "Now, Margaret, we just want what's best for everybody," before anybody had said a single word about what was going to happen. Bill shook my hand and didn't say much. He never did. He was a man who fixed air conditioners for 35 years, and I always thought he was the only one in that family who looked at me like I was a person. The broker showed up at 10 till 2. Kurt Mabry, 50-ish, nice shoes. One of those handshakes where they cover your hand with the other one. He set a laptop at the head of my dining table, and Vanessa put a folder down in front of me, and inside the folder, right on top, was a brochure for the place off Coit. A photograph of a woman about my age doing watercolors with 3 other people. Danny sat next to Vanessa. Not next to me. He'd shaved for it. And Vanessa ran that meeting like she was pitching a stranger. She talked about comps on Bell Ridge and 2 streets over, and a house on Hollow Creek that went 11 over asking in March, and the trapped equity, and the spring window, and the fact that the kitchen would need to be lightened up, but she'd already started that. She said the word asset 4 times. She said, "We're looking at a family asset that's been underperforming for a decade." I sat there with my hands folded and I let her talk. From where I was sitting, I could see the door frame between the kitchen and the hall, painted flat and clean. And the west light was coming through that window over the sink, the one I fought Alvadrine's framer about for 2 days, because I wanted it 8 inches wider, and it was laying across the table at exactly 4 minutes past 2 in November. Exactly the way I'd pictured it standing in the dirt in 1998. And it fell right across Kurt Mabry's laptop. 26 years I'd waited to be right about that window. Nobody at that table knew it. Then Joanne patted my arm and said, "And Margaret, honey, the place off Coit has a shuttle. You wouldn't even have to keep the car." And Kurt, God bless him, looked up from his screen and asked the most boring question in the world. He said, "Before we go further, just for my file, whose name is on title?" Vanessa didn't even pause. "It's family. It was originally Danny's mother's, but Danny's been the one carrying it for years now. We'll have Margaret sign it listing. It's a formality." Kurt said, "Sure. Do we have a copy of the deed?" "I'll pull it Monday." "You haven't pulled it?" He said it lightly, the way one professional needles another. She said, "Kurt, I've lived in this house for 3 years." And I reached down and picked up my purse off the floor and took out the envelope and set it on the table, and I slid it down toward him. I said, "You can pull it now." The room went still in a way I'd never heard that room go still, and I've heard that room hold a funeral reception. Kurt Mabry opened the envelope. He is a professional, and he did a professional job of keeping his face empty while he read, but he read it twice. Then he set the pages down and squared the edges, and he said, in a completely different voice than the one he'd been using, "The grantee is Margaret L. Collins, single woman, recorded September of 1998. There have been no transfers recorded since." He turned the page, and the lien was released in 2011. Vanessa said, "Right, but that's just how it was set up." Kurt said, "Ma'am, that's how it is." Danny hadn't moved. He was looking at the table, and I watched the color go out of his face in real time, and I want you to know that I felt it. I've been his mother for 42 years, and you don't stop being that because of a lockbox. Then I said the thing I had practiced with Carolyn Estes in an office in Oak Cliff with a dog snoring under the desk. I said it slowly, because she'd told me the only mistake I could make was to get loud. I said, I built this house. I bought the lot with Ray's insurance money in 1996, and I put it up in 1998, and I paid the last note on it myself in 2011. At a branch on Forest Lane, in person. My name is the only name that has ever been on it. It is not a family asset. It is my house. It is not for sale in the spring, and it is not for sale, ever. Joanne's hand came off my arm. Since March, I said, I have paid your daughter $380 a month and then $780 to sleep in a room in my own house. I paid it because my son asked me not to make a thing out of it. I have the checks. Every one of them is in my handwriting. Vanessa started to say something about utilities, and I held up my hand, which is a thing I have almost never done to another person in my life. Then I took out the second envelope, and I put it in front of Danny. I said, That's from my attorney. It's a notice to vacate. It's dated today, and it gives you 30 days. And Carolyn says 30 days is generous. I heard Vanessa's chair scrape. I said, 30 days is plenty of time to find something. And Bill, who had not opened his mouth in an hour, said one word. He said, Vanessa. Just her name. The way you'd say it to a child who has finally done the thing you warned her about, and she turned on her own father with her eyes shining and said, Daddy, don't. And that was when I understood that this had been discussed in Tyler more than once, and that her own parents had known exactly what she was doing and had decided not to say anything until it was in front of them. Kurt Mabry closed his laptop very quietly and stood up and said, Mrs. Collins, I'm sorry. I wasn't given accurate information. He put his card on the table and left, and I heard his car start in my driveway, and I don't think a man has ever apologized to me more sincerely for less. Danny still hadn't touched the envelope. He said, Mom. His voice cracked on the one syllable the way it did when he was 13. He said, Where are we supposed to go? And I looked at my son across the table I ate at alone for 11 years before he moved back in. I said, I don't know, sweetheart, but you'll call somebody, and I hope whoever you call says come home. Vanessa was gone in 9 days. She didn't need 30. Her mother came with a van, and neither of them knocked on my door on the way out, and the last thing I heard of her was the tailgate slamming and the van pulling off Belridge Court a little too fast. Danny stayed another week. We were careful with each other, the way you are after something has been said out loud that can't be unsaid. He fixed the keypad on the garage and put the code back to 1998 without being asked. Then on a Tuesday, he loaded his truck, and he stood in the driveway by the crepe myrtle, and he said, I know what you did for me. I just stopped looking at it. I told him that happens to people. I told him it happens to good ones too. He went to an apartment in Richardson, and for about 2 months we talked on the phone on Sundays, and neither of us said one word about the house. In January, I got a sanding block, and I went to work on that door frame between the kitchen and the hall. 2 coats of Swiss coffee comes off slower than you'd think. I worked at it for 3 evenings with the radio on, and then a gray line came up out of the white, and then a number, and then the rest of it. Danny, 7, in carpenter's pencil. Still there under all that paint, because Vanessa had covered it, but you can't actually erase something that's pressed into the wood. I got a pencil out of the kitchen drawer and I put a new mark on that frame. Not a height. Just the date, January of this year. Low down where the old ones are, so the 2 of them have to live next to each other. He came by on a Saturday in February. By himself. He didn't bring anything up about money or the house or her, and I didn't either. And we sat on the back porch where the west light comes in, and he drank his coffee wrong, the way he's drunk it since he was 19, with too much sugar. Before he left, he stopped in the hallway and looked at that door frame for a good while. He didn't say anything about it. He just put his hand flat on it, the way you'd touch a headstone or a shoulder, and then he went on out to his truck. That's where we are now. He's got a key. He knocks anyway, and I've decided to let him. I'm Margaret Collins, and I built that house, and I'm still in it. Doris says I ought to tell you what happened the following summer, when Vanessa's father called me from Tyler with something he'd been carrying around for 3 years. But that's a longer sit, and you'll want a cup of coffee for it.